Hiya, so I wanted to do a new English paper piecing tutorial and I wanted to look at how you EPP houses. They're a really fun and versatile shape. So we're not going to do any fussy cutting in this video, we're just going to look at how you cut, baste and sew together your houses, as well as the shapes that you can put in the outer edges of your houses to join them together. So grab a cup of tea, coffee, biscuits, snacks, anything see-through and your sewing supplies if you're going to sew along, and let's get English paper piecing. I'm going to start off by, so this is my house, I'm using the 1-inch house template from Paper Pieces. I'm going to lay it onto my fabric and then I'm going to use my scissors and cut around it. I tend to cut with 3/8 of an inch or thereabouts. If you're not too confident in your cutting skills, you can see I went way too much. If you're not too confident about making sure it's right, you can see there it's not very straight, but it won't matter too much. Paper Pieces do also do an acrylic template here, in which case you can lay the acrylic on top and it's added the 3/8 of an inch seam allowance for you, and then you'll just cut around it there using this as a guide. So put my template on, I've cut around the shape with my seam allowance. Now I quite like to use wonder clips, so these are the Clover ones, and I would clip it there and I would clip it there, and for me this holds it much more secure than a pin. If it were a bigger shape, because these are 1 inch, they're quite small, and the 1 inch is measured along the 3 edges that make the square part of the house. If it were bigger than 1 inch, I would probably use a third clip there as well. I find this holds it a lot, you literally can't move that now, so there's a lot less wiggle room, which is perfect for basting. So basting thread, do it in a contrasting colour so you can see it clearly, it makes it much easier to take it out. Make sure you've got a really sharp needle, and always start here on the back. So I've knotted my thread twice just so it's quite a secure knot there, and I'm going to start and finish from the back of my work. This way when I come to take the paper pieces out, I'm not flipping the quilt back and forth. So I've folded this over and I'm just finger pressing it or thumb pressing it down into place. I'm then going to go through the folded fabric, the paper template, and take it through to the front. And you can see there how my knot's then just catching here. I'm then going to, as well as finger pressing it along here, I'm just going to use my thumbnail there just to really make sure that I find where the edge of the template is. And I'm then going to fold it over, making sure that I'm pushing my nail right into that crease as I fold. That then makes it a really crisp fold there. And it also helps using the pure solids because it's got a really beautiful soft weave. It means you can get this fold really well. And then I'm going to come back up just probably 1/8 of an inch along. Not too precise about it because all these stitches are going to come out. And I'm going down on the corner. Now I always go down on the corner because that holds that fabric into place. I'll then take the clip off so it doesn't get in my way. I come up halfway along that edge. Don't worry if it pulls it because it's only on the back. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to use my thumb and really dig that nail in so I can get that fold over. I'll take that other clip off. And you can see here I've come up to the wrong side of the work, halfway along that edge. I then go down on the corner and it's holding that fold into place. So I come back up halfway along the edge, use my thumb, finger press it all into place, use my nail, really push the nail in there and fold it over. And I then go down again on the corner to hold that fold into place. And you're basically going to you're basically going to work your way around the shape in this manner. Just come halfway along, use your nail, fold it into place, go down on the corner, and you're on the home stretch now. Come up halfway along the shape, and I do this same process for a 1.5 inch house, for a 2-inch house. I'd always go down on the corner because I want to hold that fold into place without getting a knot in my thread. I want to hold that So you can see here that because I've gone down on every corner, none of these folds are going to come undone. Whereas if I'd come up on a corner and gone down in the middle and up again on the other corner, it's not going to hold it secure at all. So that's held it really nicely secure. And I come back up, I'm just going to tie a knot in it. It just has to be secure enough that it's not going to pop out as you're sewing. So I've tied the knot in, use my thread snippers and just snip it off. And that is your basted house. Don't worry about these stitches being neat because they're all going to come out at the end anyway. So you want to go ahead and make 4 of these. So there's another one that I've got. And what we're going to do is we're going to sew them together into pairs. So always, if these were 2 different colours, if this was pink and this one was blue, always use a thread that matches one of the fabrics that you're sewing. Because I'm using 2 pinks, I'm going to go with this pink thread, and that's the 758. So I've threaded my needle up, and this is I use a really, really thin, I actually quite like to use a milliner's needle because they're long and they're thin, and I find them much easier to grip. And what I've done is I've actually put, I'd say about 4 or 5 knots here, one on top of the other, because I don't want it to come undone. When sewing these shapes together, you're going to sew them into pairs. So I'm going to line these 2 up here, and you're going to place them on top of each other like this. And if you want to, you can clip, I sew left to right because that's the direction I write in, so it feels more natural. But if you sew right to left, then just pop the clip on that side instead. Because I'm doing left to right, I'm going to clip there because I've lined those 2 points up and I know that they're in place. This clip's then going to hold it in place. Got the knots in here. I'm not going to start here, even though I want to sew from here. If I put it here, then actually your knot's at the weakest point of your sewing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start about 1/4 inch along, and I'm just going to go through the 2 edges of the fabric, not through the paper template, but just I'm trying to see if I can get it in focus. See there, I'm just going through the very edge of the 2 fibres, and my knot's just holding. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take 2 stitches there, going through the edges of the fabrics, not the paper piece. Make sure here that your thread doesn't get caught on your template like mine did. Then pull it tight. So you're just going to go through twice, and that's going to hold your knot, and you've just done a couple of anchor stitches as well. And because it's only about 1/4 inch long, I'm then just going to take my needle now back to the start where I want to join them. And I'm going to go through. So this is called a whip stitch, and you're just taking the needle through the 2 edges of the fabrics. And you can kind of feel if you're going to go through the paper templates, and just go through them, not the templates, through the 2. You basically want to catch 2 fibres from each of the fabrics at the very, very edge, and you're just going through here. And the flip side of using the clip does mean that it does catch occasionally. And I'm just sewing all the way up to the clip until the clip gets in the way, and then that's when I take it off. So I then take it off, and I'll just sew up to the end. I do my whip stitches around about 1/8 inch apart, and then just continue going up. Don't worry too much if you catch the edge of the folded fabric, that's fine, because again it's not going to show when it's on the right side. Just going through 2 edges. So I'm going to go right up to that point because that's where I want it to hold into place. Once I get to this point, I'm going to take another 2 stitches right here on the corner, just so I can make sure that's really secure. So that's 1 stitch, 2 stitch. I'm then going to take it back another 1/8 inch, again, so that my finishing knot isn't on the weak part. And the weak part is kind of where you open it up. So take it back 1/8 inch, take 1 stitch, I'm going to take a 2nd stitch, and here's where you get the loop of fabric. So before you pull the loop through, I'm going to pass my needle through this loop once, twice, and pull it. And you should be able to feel there, it's just made a little knot on top. So that's nice and secure. Snip your thread, and then at this point I always tie a knot in the thread straight away, because otherwise I tend to do that thing, you know, when you start sewing and then realise you haven't knotted your thread and it's just come straight out the other side. So I'm preempting that by tying a knot, and I'm just doing 4 knots, one on top of the other, just because I know I pull quite tight, my knot will pull through otherwise. So you're sewing that together in your pair, and you're then going to repeat that to make these 2 and sew them together in your pair. You've got your 2 parts of the house there, and you're going to sew them together. And this is what helps you to make sure that that point is really nice and crisp. So you sew them into 2 pairs, then you're going to fold them over in here, and you want to make sure, so you line those points up that you're sewing towards and add one of your clips to it. This very centre bit here, make sure that all 4 have met, and then you're going to put a clip there to hold that in place. So you know that these points that you really want to meet are now in place. Now you're going to do the same thing. So I've already tied the knots in. I've used a thread that matches at least one of the fabrics. In this case it's matched all of them. I'm starting at 1/8 of an inch along. Make sure you've got a really sharp needle, because that definitely helps. I've put my knot in it, and I'm just going to take 2 anchoring stitches, just so that knot definitely isn't going to pull through. And I'm quite a tight stitcher, so I do pull mine tightly, and that's why I like using this Gutermann sew-all thread, because it can withstand, I was going to say my strength, but that makes it sound like I'm really strong. I'm not, I just know it doesn't break. So I've taken my 2 anchoring stitches, I'm now going back 1/8 of an inch to that corner that I want to start from, and I'm just going through very edges of the fibres and working my way towards the clips. So I'm just doing a whip stitch. So there are other stitches that you can do. There's a flat back stitch, and that can come in really handy when you're doing curved shapes, and also when you're doing pattern matching, because it really allows you to see it as you're sewing. I can't get any closer now without it catching on there, so I'm going to take that clip off, and I'm just going to keep sewing that. So when you get to this middle point, you really want to make sure that you are getting that nice and crisp, and this is where it helps using a matching thread, because any stitches then hopefully won't show when you open it back up. So I'm just going through, and you literally just have to be really careful here. Make sure you're going through the very edges here of the fabric, and you have to make sure you're not catching the template here, otherwise it'd be a real pain when you come to take the paper pieces out, and it'd be harder to reuse them then. So I actually end up doing a couple of stitches right in the middle just to hold it. So I've done about 3 stitches there to hold it in place, and then I'm going to continue. I'm just going to pull that tail out of the way ever so slightly with my needle, so I can make sure that I'm going through the 2 fabrics that I want to join. It doesn't matter too much if you sew that in. It can just be a bit painful on your fingers, because you're essentially adding another layer. So I'm going to keep sewing all the way up to the clip in a tight whip stitch, and I'm going to sew right up to this point here. And then once I reach that point, I do 2 or 3 stitches right at that corner to hold it in place, and then I'll go back 1/8 of an inch so that my finishing knot isn't on the open point. So do 1 stitch, 2 stitch, take it back 1/8 of an inch, put the needle through once, twice, leave the loop. You're going to go through the loop once, twice, put it nice and tight, check that you can feel the knot. If you can't feel the knot, then just do it again. Clip thread, and then open up, and that's your house. And obviously it'll need a press just to make sure it lies flat. You can see here it's sitting nice and flat here, and your points have gone really beautifully. So there, that is your house. And you can either leave it as it is and join them together kind of as the cross that they are, or you can add squares to the outer edges of your houses, or you can add half square triangles to the outer edges, which creates a really fun kind of octagon shape. So if you want to join the squares or the triangles, then I'll just quickly show you how to do it. So you just join them one at a time. You can see here that's going to fit in like that. So I'm just going to fold it over here so that the right sides are together. I'm going to use my clip to hold that point in place, and I'm just going to bend that tail out of the way so I can cleanly see where I'm going to be sewing from. So then start like 1/4 inch in, having tied 3 or 4 knots at the end of my thread, and I'm just going to take a couple of anchoring stitches here. Just unhook that. I'm just going to pull that through, and then once I've taken the couple of anchoring stitches, just to hold that knot into place so it won't undo, I'm then going to go back to the start, which is where I want to begin joining the shape from. And you can kind of feel if you're not going through the edges of the fabric, if you're catching the template, which you don't really want to do. And you're then just going to sew all the way with a tight whip stitch. If you prefer to do a flat back stitch, then that's fine. Just stitch it using your preferred method. You can see I'm just pulling it really, really tight here so that my stitches aren't going to show. It's not going to be baggy. And then when I get up to this inner corner, I'm actually going to do one of those finishing knots, but on the corner, just to make sure it's super secure. So I'm putting my needle through, and I'm leaving that small loop of fabric, and then going to pass my needle through the loop once, twice, pull it tight, not so tight that it snaps. I'm then going to fold it out, and I'm going to sew this edge up. And to do that, I'm going to fold this over. So at this point, I am bending this house in half so I can finish sewing across. And that's absolutely fine because they're paper pieces, paper bends, and it's fine. And you can just give it a really light iron afterwards to straighten it back out if you want. I tend to give them a really quick iron and then shove them underneath a heavy book to hold it flat. So once I've tied the knot, I'm then just going to make sure that I'm going right through the 2 edges here of the fabric and not the templates, and then I'm going to continue sewing up to finish off this edge. You can just, if this tail gets in your way, you can just kind of hold it out of place there so that fold of fabric isn't being caught in, but don't worry too much. So I tend to do my stitches around about the 1/16 of an inch apart. I think you can do them around about, as long as there's around 12 to 16 stitches per inch, that kind of tends to be what I aim for, though I don't count them out religiously, so don't worry too much about that. So I'm going to sew right up to this point here, and then when I get to that point, I'll just take a couple of extra anchoring stitches, in the same way as we sewed the house together really, just to make sure that I don't have a knot, the finishing or starting knot on the weak points. So I've taken 1 extra stitch, 2 extra stitches, and then I go back a 1/4 inch, take an extra stitch there, and then pass it through the loop once, twice, pull it, make sure you can feel the knot there, and then chop your thread. And then that is your octagon shaped block with the house in the middle and your half square triangles around the edges. So for joining them then, you can join the houses as they are. Let me just move some of these bits out of the way so that it's easier to see. Right, so these are the fuss cut blocks that we'll be looking at in the next video. So you can join the houses as is. And I quite like this. It creates quite a nice kind of scrappy look to it, which looks really beautiful. and just let them butt up against each other essentially. You can add your squares to the outside like we did with the half square triangles. The principle's the same, and you will end up bending your house in half as you sew the other edge, and that's fine. So then you join these together. Let me see if I can do that fit here. And then what you'll do is you'll start to get this larger house coming through here. And then when they're all joined up, you kind of create this. So the houses are meeting on these edges, like the flat bottom edge of your house, with bigger squares in between. You can do fussy cutting in these squares, or you could just do it as a plain or a blender solid to let your fussy cutting pop. Or the other option, sorry, if you're doing your squares actually, so you measure it along this edge of the house. So these are 1 inch houses, and that's because these 3 bottom edges of the house that form the square, they're all 1 inch. So I would then use a 1 inch square to fit in between it. And then if you want to do your half square triangles, there's 2 layout options for that. So you can join them in the same way you would do with your squares. So you're going to match up kind of those flat bottom edges here, like that, and then you're going to fussy cut or like plain blender solid for this square here. The only difference with this one is because this is against this longer edge of your half square triangle. So if you're doing it against here, that's your 1 inch, but obviously this is going to be a bit longer. It tends to be a slightly irregular shape. So if I then wanted a square to pop in here, I would need to do 1 and 6, maybe 1 and 5 of an inch to do that. So you could join 4 of your half square triangles to make that, or just cut and measure kind of that size there. Or the other option, if you want to do the typical using this as like a 1 inch square, is I'm going to put them on point. So I'm then gonna, in here, and this is where the tails kind of help, because you can then butt them against each other like that, and the same here, and they'll all be sewn together. And you can see here where I've put the crosses on point instead, and then that square is going to be your regular 1 inch square because it's against that bottom edge of the house. So that would then fit in there, and that can work really nicely either with a solid, or you could fussy cut something really small, really dainty. You could even add some embroidery to really make it pop. So lots of options for joining them together. You can do it as is, you can do it with the half square triangles, or you can do it with the squares, or another way entirely. So let me know what you think, share pictures of what you make using this, and I can't wait to see what you've created. And I'll see you soon when we start to look at how to fussy cut these blocks. Bye.